Hello, this is Kim Jong Timo, and this is Scouting the Meta, and today's episode we will be going over the mid lane from July 15th to August 2nd. First up is our popular picks, and our first one for the mid lane is Viktor. Viktor was picked 83 times in the past 3 weekends, although he only won 36 of those matches. Viktor ended up being the most picked mid lane champion by 39 picks. The next closest behind him is Azir with 44. So Viktor is a very mid-range champion with a ton of burst damage. Viktor provides a lot of AoE and a lot of zone control in a team fight between his Chaos Storm and his Gravity Field. Viktor also provides really great wave clear just from his laser beam. But like I mentioned earlier, he didn't really have the greatest win rate, but that's because he also has a lot of weaknesses in his kit, which doesn't make him a bad champion, it just means he has counterplay. One of his biggest weaknesses is his lack of mobility. Viktor's only mobility comes in the form of his augmented Q, which just gives him a speed boost after he uses it. And with current jungle meta having a lot of mobility and early game pressure, that just doesn't make for the best laning phase if you push in too far. In fact, that's why a lot of these Viktors don't win their games, is because they'll push up too far, get behind from a gank, and then the enemy mid laner will just keep snowballing. So I see Viktor as one of the strongest mid lane champions right now, and I don't expect that to change too much because I don't feel like he's overpowered. Because he has his weaknesses in lane due to his lack of mobility, which allows counterplay. Like for example, an assassin pick. He struggles against a lot of assassins because of their high mobility and his lack of mobility. So as hard as I've been on Viktor, I think he's a great champion. He provides tons of damage while also providing a decent amount of utility. But it's not too much utility to where it makes the damage overwhelming, because his stun only goes off if you sit on the gravity field, and his ult is only a channel interrupt now. So as long as assassins aren't that popular in the mid lane, I'd expect to keep seeing Viktor. And if you pick him in solo queue, please do not overextend. The next pick we'll be going over is probably one of the most controversial ones in recent history, and that's runeglaive Ezreal. He ended up being picked 35 times, and he had just a barely sub 50% win rate. And for anyone who's been living under a rock, I'm going to go over the runeglaive Ezreal. So the issue with AP Ezreal has always been his laning phase was really bad, and it took forever for him to get going. And runeglaive fixes all of those problems because it gives him a cheap early power spike with the runeglaive. And the reason I said this is so controversial is because when runeglaive was on PBE, someone suggested buying it on Ezreal in the mid lane and going AP, and this kind of put the internet in cahoots about it. A lot of people were all, oh, this is going to be trash, it's a bad idea. And then patch came out, a lot of people were trying it out, and they were even more upset because a lot of people were playing AP Ezreal and not doing well with it. But then the pros started playing it, and everyone thought it was overpowered all of a sudden, and they wanted it nerfed, and then Riot nerfed it. So once those patches hit live, we'll probably stop seeing AP Ezreal picked professionally. So now that I've given a brief history on the build, let's go over the pick itself. AP Ezreal is one of the best poke champions because his entire kit is long range skill shots. And combined with his Essence Flux, he becomes a really good kiting champion with a lot of AoE in team fights. And as I briefly touched upon earlier, his late game is just ridiculous. As I mentioned earlier, Riot did nerf it. It won't really be usable at all because runeglaive will only go off on monsters from now on. So this kind of eliminates being able to build it in lane, which personally I have mixed feelings about because it's really fun to watch people snipe with True Shot Barrage and just hit for ridiculous amounts of damage, but at the same time I hate getting hit by those shots of True Shot Barrage. So personally I think this is a fun pick to see while I was around, and I'll be just a little bit sad to see it go, but not entirely. So next on our list is Azir. Azir is a very late game champion with just ridiculous scaling in the late game. and he's been kind of a strong pick for a little bit now. So Azir doesn't really have the best early game, but he still has kind of a safe laning phase because of his massive range on his soldiers. Although they can't really be casted that far away from him, he can move them pretty far away from him with his Q, Shifting Sands. On top of that, he has one of the longest range dashes between his QE combo, and he has one of the strongest ultimates in the game. A great Azir player can kind of insect a team with his ult and create just tremendous plays with it. Some of them can even create 1v4 quadra kills under a tower that they've created. He is also one of the best mid lane champions for fighting in the jungle. Also, Orianna's really good at it because they can both create really good zone control and choke points. So as I've already mentioned, ridiculous late game scaling with damage and range, but he is not invincible late game. His only form of mobility can be body blocked. So if he's already used his ult, he kind of really doesn't really fare that well against assassins. So one of the biggest weaknesses to Azir is poke comps. He doesn't really do that well against them because, as I mentioned earlier, the cast range on the soldiers aren't the greatest. But having said all that, I think he is the strongest mid lane champion right now. He provides a ton of utility and just a ton of damage late game. So unless he gets nerfed, which I could see happening, I'd expect to see him all the way throughout Worlds. So our third most popular pick this week was going to be Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate's been seeing kind of a rise in popularity recently. I think he's the third strongest mid laner behind Azir and a Viktor. And that's simply because of his ultimate. It's probably one of the strongest in the game because of the global teleport, where he can just come out of it and gold card someone right away. So even though his ult is very strong, he does have his weaknesses. Just like Viktor, he has a very immobile kit, which is why everyone brings 2 mobility summoners on him with Ghost and Flash. So if both Ghost and Flash are down, that makes him very vulnerable to ganks. And since he has a lack of mobility, that also makes him really weak to assassins. So the lack of assassins in the meta also helps him excel right now. Even if you do get behind as Twisted Fate though, you are still pretty useful with your gold card. And your damage does scale really well in the late game, so if you're not against a late game mid, you can also become relevant later, because he has very good burst damage between pick a card and wild card, and he also has a decent amount of sustain damage from stacked deck. So all in all, I really like the Twisted Fate pick right now. It's very, very strong. I expect to keep seeing more of it, and I really like seeing good Twisted Fate players use good Destinies, because I think Destiny is actually one of the most difficult spells in the game to use, correctly at least, because a very bad Destiny will get you killed, and a bad Destiny can also end up in pretty much just nothing, and it's a very high cooldown to waste like that. But on the other hand, a great Destiny can turn around the game for a team, so that's why I think it's one of the strongest abilities in the game right now. So unless assassins become strong, I expect to keep seeing Twisted Fate, which I'm excited about because I really love watching the champion. He's really fun to watch, and I think he's really strong. So hopefully we'll keep seeing him more, and I'm hoping to see him at Worlds. So our next segment is Ban Prison, and our most banned champion over the past 3 weeks was Azir, who was banned 62 times, which makes him banned 18 more times than he was picked. Also getting a lot of bans are some champions like Ezreal with 41, Twisted Fate with 35, Viktor with 31, and Fizz with 28, but most of those are targeted at the top lane and not many targeted at the mid lane, although he's been kind of popular in China in the mid lane lately. And Azir is probably the most banned because he's kind of hard to deal with late game. Just so much range, so much damage, it really becomes difficult to handle with a lot of team comps. So if you don't really pick the right team comp to play against him, you kind of can't handle him late game. So if team doesn't plan on picking a comp that can deal with him, they usually just ban him away so they don't have to deal with him. So next up is our fresh picks, and I'm going to preface this with Nautilus mid lane, 100% win rate, OP boys. So Nautilus was picked twice in the mid lane by DoinB of Qiao Gu. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce the team name, but there wasn't really anything special about his build or anything. It was fairly straightforward, just tank. So you might be wondering, why would you play a tank out of the top lane? Well, quite simply, both times he played this, it was against melee mid laners that he could shove in the wave and make things happen elsewhere on the map. Because Nautilus has great wave clear that a melee can't stand next to him, because he'll just keep riptiding and it will just do so much damage if they stay there for it. So he'd push the wave, force his enemy mid laner under tower, and then roam the map with his jungler, which both games happened to be Nidalee. And the Nidalee pick was important because it allowed DoinB to pick a tanky mid laner and not really be punished on the damage end, because they also had a Maokai in top lane both games. So they ended up being a really tanky team overall between Maokai and Nautilus both games, and a tanky support both games. So I'd also like to bring up his summoner choices. The first game he took Ignite, and then the second one he brought Teleport, which is actually really interesting to me, because he teleported bot lane, picked up a kill, walked back in mid lane, and by the time he got back to mid lane, Kassadin had just gotten the wave back to the middle of lane, so he could just push the wave in again, because Kassadin wasn't quite 6. So this ended up being 2 games that were really fun to watch, so I'd suggest watching them, and I will drop links in the description of this so you can. And although I think this is a really good pick in this situation, I would not suggest doing it in solo queue, because, well, quite frankly, you'll probably just upset your teammates if you pick Mid Nautilus. Our next fresh pick is going to be Mid Rumble. Keen brought this out, and they didn't win the game, but that wasn't really because of the Rumble pick. I actually really liked the pick, especially after the AP item changes. The Leandry's rush is so much stronger, and Rumble is also right by Dragon if in case Dragon fights. This pick didn't work out because of overextension by Keen, letting Ahri get ahead, and after that, the game just really snowballed in Dignitas' favor. Our next fresh pick is another off-meta pick that has a 100% win rate, at least over the last 3 weeks had a 100% win rate, and that's Irelia. Irelia is a really good mid lane pick into the right champions, such as immobile champions who don't do well against assassins like Viktor. So if she can get some early kills on Viktor, she can really snowball in the mid game, because, well, Irelia has one of the strongest mid games in the entire game. This is a pick I don't really see becoming meta, but the players who do learn to play Irelia could definitely pull it out at any time. But that would force a lot of mid laners to have to take the time to learn her, which that might be kind of a deterrent from adding it to their champion pool. As for solo queue, if you already know how to play Irelia and you want to just use her in the mid lane, like I said, definitely against the right picks, it can be really good, especially if you have some magic damage elsewhere on the team. Otherwise, I'd say stay away from it if you don't know who the enemy mid laner is. So our last fresh pick is going to be Orianna, but just not any Orianna. This is runeglaive Orianna. So Power of Evil played this once against Gambit, and he rushed runeglaive, and then right after that got a Gnasher's Tooth, which gave him a lot of early and mid game power. And after finishing those 2 items, he just went into a normal Orianna build. This pick ended up being very successful for them. Power of Evil ended up getting a pentakill in the game. I don't really suggest playing this because runeglaive is not really a viable item for laners anymore. And even though we've seen the last of Orianna with runeglaive, she's still going to be a pretty popular pick, just with her normal build. She's one of the best champions to pair with anyone with Engage, really. So our next segment is, this is the first time for the segment. It's only going to be whenever it's applicable. It's called On the Rise. We're going to go over champions who I think are going to gain more popularity and should gain more popularity. And today I have 2 On the Rise champions. The first one being Ahri. Ahri gained a lot of strength with the AP itemization changes. Rylai became a very strong pick on her, giving her a lot more utility. Rylai's gives her Q a 40% AoE slow, which just makes her so much stronger. I think this really makes her one of the strongest mid lane picks, probably around 4th or 5th. Once she has her Rylai's and some CDR, she just becomes impossible to catch. She can kite you for days while dashing away, and the entire time she's doing it, she's dealing a ton of damage to you. So I suggest really trying her out in solo queue. I think she's really strong. She has a lot of versatility because she can be an assassin, and at the same time she can be kind of a kite mage. Our second on the rise pick is going to be Orianna. So yeah, I already talked about her a little bit, so I'm going to keep this a little short and simple. She just provides a lot of late game damage with a lot of utility between her shield and her ult. I think Shockwave is one of the strongest teamfight ultimates in the game. So I would like to see more Orianna because I think she's really strong, especially after the itemization changes. Our next segment is the awards part of the video, and our first is top of the class with Azir. Azir won 26 of the 44 games he was picked in, giving him a near 60% win rate. Our bottom feeder this week is Azir. He ended up with about a 44% win rate, although it's not terrible. It ended up being one of the worst ones out of the mid lane. And I'd like to repeat the sentiment that I don't think Viktor's bad, I just think that he has a lot of exploitable weaknesses. And the last segment of our video is Roundup. We're going to start off with Zed, who was picked twice, went 1-1, he was banned 9 times, and they were mostly bans away from Mickey of Anarchy. Cassiopeia was picked 7 times, going 4-3. Varus saw a total of 16 picks over the past 3 weeks. Lulu is making her comeback to the mid lane, getting 19 picks. Yasuo was picked 9 times and banned away 13 times. Fizz was picked out of the mid lane 7 times and winning 6 of those, making a bit of a comeback in China out of the mid lane. Ziggs, everyone's least favorite champion to watch, was picked once and lost. Master Yi was picked once by enemies Inox and failed to win with that. Diana saw a bit of a resurgence with runeglaive and saw 5 picks. AP Kog'Maw Mid saw 5 picks, winning 4 of them. Syndra was picked twice, splitting even on those 2 games. Everyone's favorite mid-assassin, Jarvan IV, was picked twice, splitting even. And Ryze's first loss in a while actually came out of the mid lane, getting picked once. And Morgana was also picked up once, ending in failure. That's all I got for the episode today, so once again, if you liked the video, like and subscribe, and if you want, you can follow me on Twitter, @KimJongTimo.